And it is now my honor to welcome to the dais Mr. Christian Klos, Director General for the Public Security at the Ministry of Interior in Germany. Dr. Christian Klos is a renowned expert in public security, immigration, and international law. He has served in Germany's Federal Ministry of the Interior in various capacities, rising to his current role as Director General for Public Security. His work has often involved leading international delegations related to asylum, migration, and counter-terrorism. He was an assistant professor at the University of Constance and earned a PhD with a focus on European migration policy. We could probably use you here, by the way, in Israel for a couple of years. If you want to come on sabbatical, we could use your expertise. We have problems with all the same things that you're an expert in. All right, terrific. The floor is yours.
Shalom. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and I would like to start with a thesis. Terrorism is a communication strategy, not just a political crime, a communication strategy. In the view of the perpetrator, it is possibly foremost a way of communication. Their terrorist atrocities are just a means to serve a higher cause. In their distorted perspective, a break with all civilized rules is justified to send a message to their atrocities. This is even valid if they target soft targets. I'm not sure whether Germany's counter-terrorism approach takes this fully into account so far. Well, it's kind of neglected perspective. However, my perspective as a DG for public security supervising the National Intelligence Service, BFV, and the Federal Criminal Police Office and dealing with a national, European, international law and policy in the fight against extremism, also counter-terrorism, I have to say that the present CT strategies have proven to be effective. Well, I should say proven within their remit. And within my responsibilities, and we have heard of it a lot this morning already, you can summarize on the measures of intelligence, prevention, and repression. But there is a world beyond, and I will come back later to this. In Germany, we have had quite some significant terrorist attacks, most prominently, as already mentioned, the Islamistic attack in 2016 in Berlin, the Christus market, the anti-Semitic attack in Halle 2019, and the right-wing attack in Hanau 2020. Nevertheless, we have also seen considerable successes, about 20 prevented terrorist plots in the last 20 years. I'm reflecting today on the German situation, and I should say, of course, that the threat level is nothing compared to here in Israel. It's different. And an Israeli colleague recently told us that he would like to have our problems, take into account the scale of the terrorist threat here, and actually I understand him. But having said that, before I elaborate that on the extremist threat, in particular in Germany, which is quite significant and might also grow in part in a terrorist one in some areas, I'd like to highlight our absolutely outstanding cooperation between the Ministry of Interior in Germany and the former Ministry of Public Security, respectively the Ministry of National Security here in Israel. And a few weeks ago, we celebrated the 15th anniversary of our annual high-level consultations in Tel Aviv, which are prepared and complemented by countless meetings of experts and of the security community of both countries in the course of each year. Israel and Germany face common challenges coping extremism and terrorism, and we have managed to establish an intensive cooperation on strategies, policies, and technologies based on trust and friendship. And this is far, as the Deputy Ambassador said, this is far from being a matter of course. I'm very thankful for that, and I'm happy to see you, Gadi, here, and we have just had our talks in early July. Terrorism is an act of despair. While extremists often believe that they can reach their objectives by continuing their political statements and activities, regardless whether they are lawful or legalistic, terrorists appear to have lost this belief. They choose the ultimate escalation, not seldom by intentionally risking or even sacrificing their own lives. The fury behind this unnatural denial of the own survival instinct is fueled by radical ideology. But this is not a sign of strength. Actually, this is rather a sign of despair, helplessness, a feeling of inability to change politics by peaceful means. You cannot impress a suicide bomber with a threat of punishment. If authorities are properly equipped and prepared, as well as attentive and lucky, they may prevent an attack. But what is needed even more is a persuasive narrative that sacrificing yourself for terrorism is useless, and that there is an alternative, a perspective. We need to counter and I would like to quote here Miri Eisen, the terrorism vibe, in particular for the young generation. Terrorism must become uncool. However, the intelligence and police community cannot change the perceptions of and the narratives on terrorism. Primarily, other actors of the state or civil society are needed here. Let me focus on the current developments in Germany with regard to extremism. At present, we consider right-wing extremism the number one extremist threat and the threat to democracy in Germany. The number of right-wing extremists are estimated about 39,000 individuals, of which about 14,000 were considered prone to using violence. The so-called Neue Rechte, the new right, is an informal network of groups and individuals that seek to advance anti-democratic positions in society and politics. Their adherents often spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, not seldom inspired by similar movements in other countries, for example in the US, the QAnon, to name one. The parliamentary arm of the new right, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, Alternative für Deutschland, is classified as a suspected right-wing extremist union by our National Intelligence Service. You might have heard that the approval rating, however, in the opinion polls for the AfD are high, amounting up to 20%, in some regions even higher. Although in other European countries far-right parties reach equivalent approval rates, it is a new situation for post-war Germany. A recent survey has shown that a significant share of the alleged supporters of the AfD are not extremists. Nevertheless, the number of extremists in the party is very worrying. That's why it is under the intelligence monitoring screen. I should note, however, that the National Intelligence Agency is able to deliver information on extremist developments in parties, but the fight against such developments in the party, which is represented in many German parliaments and not banned by the Federal Constitutional Court, must be a political one performed by political actors. There's another obscure movement in Germany, the so-called sovereign citizens, Reichsbürger, who deny the legitimacy of the Federal Republic of Germany and its constitutional order. Their thinking is open to a wide range of conspiracy theories, again, and that's actually the genuine link between various extremist movements linked with anti-Semitic connotations. For example, with reference to the New World Order. We estimate the potential of the Reichsbürger movement is about 23,000 people, of which 10% are possibly becoming violent. In December 22, the Federal Public Prosecutor General had arrested suspected members of the Reichsbürger group around Heinrich VIII Prince Reuss, a royalist. The organization set itself the goal to violently overthrow the existing state order in Germany and replace it with their own realistic order. Needless to say that this was beyond reality. But in their world of imagination, it was real and might have caused casualties if they would have succeeded in attacking the German parliament, the Bundestag. Interestingly, they have a consistent worldview in their information bubble. This makes it very difficult to address and open them for other perspectives, as the state or classical media are the enemy and in their view would never forward objective information. It was also mentioned by the head of the ICTC this morning that the extremist scene gets more and more blurred. This is in particularly valid also for Germany, because extremists increasingly lack a fixed ideological background. For the better differentiation, we have established a new category of anti-constitutional delegitimization of the state. This is very German to make such huge categories, you know. They are still not that in the quantity decisive, but there are at least 1,400 people which can be counted to this new category. And their main aspects is the denial of democratic institutions or decisions, and belief also again in conspiracy theories, also with anti-Semitic content. They popped up during the COVID-19 pandemic, but have now chosen new topics like migration and energy prices to mobilize supporters. And in the context of the war of Russia against Ukraine, they also criticize financial and military aid for Ukraine and call for peace with Russia. Now I move to the other side of the political spectrum, the left-wing extremism, not to underestimate. In 22 we had around 36,500 people counted to this extremist group, among which 9,000 approximately we estimate that they could become violent. In the parts, and that's a new development, of the violence-oriented left-wing extremist scene, a high level of radicalization can be seen throughout Germany. Left-wing extremists are becoming increasingly aggressive, harming presumed right-wing extremists instead of attacks against infrastructure, which has been the preferred modus operandi throughout the last years. Currently, left-wing extremists also try to influence the climate movement to make its participants susceptible to the anti-constitutional narratives and to radicalize the democratic discourse. So far, they have not succeeded in this endeavor, but it's clearly something which we see. This morning we have rather focused more on Islamist terrorism and extremism, and also this is still an issue in Germany, and with a potential of 27,500 people. And actually we have prevented already this year 2 bombing attacks in January in North Rhine-Westphalia, where an Iranian suspect wanted to build bioweapons with ricin and cyanide. And in April, where 2 Syrians have actually been detained, and they were preparing a bomb. Luckily, we hadn't faced large-scale attack in the most recent year. All of them have been carried out by lone offenders, not seldom combined with a mental disorder. Since late summer 22, we additionally see, and this has already been mentioned, a rising threat coming from Afghanistan and Central Asia with ISIS-K. And I don't know whether Mr. Sternberg is still here. I would contradict him that we don't actually see it, that migration is, of course, a factor which we have to bear in mind. For example, we are still in a phase of admitting, for humanitarian reasons, Afghans from Afghanistan, actually from Pakistan. And we, of course, undertake security interviews and other measures to actually look whether there are also radicals among those trying to come to Germany. Let me conclude. If you have counted during my lecture, you would sum up to more than 127,000 persons regarded as extremists in Germany. Between 25 and 30,000 people might become violent. Consequently, there is no reason to relax for Germany intelligence and security forces. Extremists or even terrorist attacks receive a very high media attention. Sometimes I doubt whether this attention has the right focus. In the center of the attention are often dominantly the perpetrators and their atrocious acts. I do not criticize the media for doing their job in our open democratic societies. However, there is a communicative dilemma. Since terrorists profit from the display of terror, attention means confirmation. Excitement means even more confirmation. I have no real solution for this dilemma, as the public has also a right to know about an attack. I do not know if the focus should be laid more on the situation of the victims, their relatives and friends. It is certainly harder to digest such portrayals for the spectators. Less political or media attention might reduce terrorists' possibility to glorify their horrific acts and could lower the risk of copycat attacks. As a matter of fact, the only extremist area where we see a certain decline of numbers is those of Islamists. And there is a correlation. However, I cannot prove the causality between less media attention and numbers of Islamists in Germany. Finally, I don't want to be naive. This idea is, of course, a bit unrealistic as we live in media societies where every atrocity will receive extraordinary attention. Strangely enough, the intelligence and police community in Germany profits from such events as well. This is really sad. It's often necessary, long-awaited competency are only made available after terrorist attacks, when the same politicians who refused previously demand them in the aftermath of an attack. It shouldn't be like that. If we cannot lower the media attention on terrorist acts, resilience of the public is the only left option to undermine terrorist communication interest. I think that Israel's society is far ahead in this respect compared to German society. Regardless whether this has to do with habituation, training, or simply survival interest, Germany could learn public resilience from Israel. If I turn now to the extremists and terrorists to conclude, even in longer term, you can hardly persuade dyed-in-the-wool radicalized terrorists, reality deniers, or persons with mental disorder. But what about those who are in despair and have still a sense of humanity? It is surely worth the effort to reach out for them. They might find a path to de-radicalization. Therefore, we should adjust the way of thwarting the strategy of terrorists, which is a communication strategy. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.